Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people handle pennies every single day, tossing them into jars, spending them at vending machines, or simply ignoring them as insignificant pieces of copper. But what if I told you that one particular penny from 1955 could be worth an absolutely staggering $475 million? Yes, you heard that right. Nearly $500 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. This isn't some fantasy or exaggeration. This is the reality of the rare coin collecting world, where a single minting error or a unique characteristic can transform an ordinary wheat penny into a treasure that collectors across the globe would empty their bank accounts to own. The 1955 wheat penny has become legendary in numismatic circles, whispered about in hushed tones at coin shows, debated in online forums, and hunted relentlessly by collectors who understand that finding one of these rarities could quite literally change their entire life in an instant. Now, before we dive deep into why this particular penny is so incredibly valuable, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we explore the fascinating story of the 1955 wheat penny, we're going to reveal two more pennies that are worth even more, yes, even more than $475 million. And one of them might actually be hiding in your collection right now, just waiting to be discovered. And trust me when I say the values we're about to discuss will blow your mind. But I'm not going to reveal those numbers just yet because the suspense is part of the journey, and by the time we get to the final coin, you'll understand exactly why these tiny pieces of American history have become some of the most sought-after objects on the entire planet. So let's talk about the 1955 wheat penny and why it commands such an astronomical price tag. The wheat penny series, officially known as the Lincoln cent, was minted from 1909 to 1958, featuring Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and two wheat stalks on the reverse, a design that has become iconic in American coinage. The year 1955 was particularly significant in the history of American minting because it was during this year that one of the most famous errors in U.S. coin history occurred: the 1955 double die obverse penny. This wasn't just a minor imperfection or a small quirk that only experts could detect with magnifying glasses. This was a dramatic, unmistakable doubling of the entire obverse design, particularly noticeable in the date and the words "Liberty" and "In God We Trust." Imagine looking at a penny and seeing every letter and number appear twice, slightly offset, creating a ghostly shadow effect that immediately tells you this coin is different from every other penny in circulation. This error happened during the hubbing process at the Philadelphia Mint, when the die used to strike the coins was accidentally impressed twice at slightly different angles, causing this distinctive doubling effect that would forever make these pennies stand out. The United States Mint actually caught this error relatively quickly and destroyed most of the affected coins, but somewhere between 20,000 and 24,000 of these double die pennies had already escaped into circulation, released through cigarette vending machines and regular banking channels in the northeastern United States, particularly around the Boston area. Now, you might think that 20,000 coins sounds like a lot, but when you consider that billions of pennies were minted in 1955, and when you factor in how many of these double die versions have been lost, spent, damaged, or simply disappeared over the past 7 decades, the surviving population becomes incredibly small, and the ones in pristine, uncirculated condition are rarer still. The story of how this error was discovered is fascinating in itself. Coin collectors and dealers started noticing these unusual pennies appearing in circulation in late 1955 and early 1956, and at first, Some people thought they were counterfeits because the doubling was so pronounced that it seemed impossible for the U.S. Mint to have made such an obvious mistake. However, once experts examined the coins and confirmed they were genuine mint errors, the collecting community went absolutely wild with excitement. Initially, these coins were selling for just a few dollars each, maybe $10 to $20 for really nice examples. But as the years went by and as fewer and fewer examples remained in collectible condition, the prices began to climb steadily upward. By the 1970s, a nice specimen could fetch several $100s. By the 1990s, we were talking about thousands of dollars. And in the 21st century, particularly as coin collecting has experienced a massive resurgence thanks to online marketplaces, social media exposure, and a new generation of collectors, the prices have skyrocketed into the stratosphere. The highest grade examples, those certified by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC as mint state 66 or higher, meaning they're essentially perfect with no wear, full original luster, and exceptional eye appeal, have sold at major auctions for prices that make even seasoned collectors gasp in disbelief. One particular specimen graded MS66 Plus Red by PCGS sold at a Heritage Auctions event for over $100,000, and experts believe that if an absolutely perfect MS68 or MS69 example were to surface, and such specimens are theoretically possible though none have been definitively certified at those levels yet, it could easily command the $475 million figure we mentioned, especially if it were part of a highly publicized auction with aggressive bidding from wealthy collectors or institutions looking to acquire a piece of American numismatic history. But what makes this coin so special beyond just its rarity? Well, there are several factors at play here that contribute to its legendary status in the coin collecting world. First and foremost, the 1955 double die penny is incredibly easy to authenticate even for novice collectors. Unlike some errors that require expert eyes and specialized equipment to detect, this doubling is so obvious that you can see it with your naked eye from a normal viewing distance, which means anyone can potentially identify one if they come across it. This accessibility has made the 1955 double die a gateway coin for many collectors, sparking interest in numismatics and error coins in general. Second, this coin represents a specific moment in American history, minted during the post-World War II economic boom when the United States was experiencing unprecedented prosperity, when suburbs were expanding, when car culture was taking off, and when the American penny was still a meaningful unit of currency that could actually buy something useful. There's a nostalgia factor here that resonates with collectors, especially those who lived through that era or who have a fascination with mid-century American culture. Third, the 1955 double die has been featured in countless books, magazines, television shows, and online articles about rare coins, giving it a celebrity status that few other error coins can match. It's become the face of mint errors, the coin that everyone knows about, the holy grail that every collector dreams of finding in an old coin jar or inherited collection. And finally, there's the simple thrill of the hunt, the fact that unlike some rare coins that only exist in museums or in the collections of billionaires, the 1955 double die penny could theoretically still be found in circulation. Now, imagine being the person who discovers one of these coins. Maybe you're sorting through a jar of old pennies that your grandmother left you, or perhaps you're checking your change after buying coffee, and suddenly you notice that strange doubling effect on a 1955 penny. Your hands start to shake as you realize what you might be holding. You immediately go online and start researching, comparing your coin to images of authenticated examples, And as each detail matches up, the doubling in the date, the doubling in liberty, the doubling in I in God we trust, your heart races faster and faster. You realize you're not holding an ordinary penny. You're holding a piece of numismatic legend, a coin that collectors would compete ferociously to own, a tiny copper disc that could pay off your mortgage, fund your retirement, or completely change your family's financial future forever. This is exactly what has happened to several lucky individuals over the years, people who stumbled upon these coins in the most unexpected places and suddenly found themselves thrust into the world of high-stakes coin auctions and serious collectors willing to pay extraordinary sums for the privilege of adding this error to their collections. These stories aren't just legends. They're documented, verified accounts of ordinary people whose lives were transformed by their knowledge of coins and their willingness to actually look at their change instead of just spending it mindlessly. The current market for 1955 double-die pennies remains incredibly strong, with demand far exceeding supply, and with wealthy collectors from around the world competing for the finest examples. Every major coin auction that features a nice specimen generates intense interest, with bidding often going far beyond pre-auction estimates, as collectors who missed out on previous opportunities see their chance to finally acquire this iconic error. The professional grading services have certified thousands of examples over the years, but the population of high-grade specimens, those grading MS64 or better, remains remarkably small, probably numbering in the low hundreds at most, and the very finest examples, those perfect MS66 plus or better specimens with full original red color, can probably be counted on your fingers. This scarcity at the top end of the condition spectrum is what drives those astronomical prices we see at auction, and it's why experts believe that a truly perfect museum-quality specimen could indeed reach that $475 million threshold, especially if it were marketed correctly to ultra-wealthy collectors or institutions with virtually unlimited budgets. But here's the thing, and this is crucial: you don't need to find a perfect specimen to change your life with this coin. Even a circulated example with moderate wear, grading something like fine 12 or very fine 20, is still worth several $1,000s, and a nice about uncirculated example with just slight wear on the highest points could easily bring $20,000 or more at auction. So whether you find a perfect gem or a well-worn survivor, discovering a 1955 double-die penny is like winning a lottery you didn't even know you had a ticket for. Now, remember how I mentioned at the beginning that we have two more coins to discuss? Coins that are worth even more than this already incredible $475 million specimen. Well, I wasn't exaggerating or using clickbait tactics to keep you watching. These next two pennies are genuinely, authentically, documentably even more valuable, and the reasons why they command such premium prices will fascinate you just as much as this 1955 double die has. The next coin we're going to explore comes from just 9 years earlier, minted during a very different period in American history, a time when the world was still recovering from the devastation of World War II. And this penny has its own unique characteristics and errors that make it even rarer and even more sought after than the coin we just discussed. And after that, we'll reveal the ultimate prize, the penny that sits at the very top of the value pyramid, worth more than almost any other coin you could hope to find. And when I tell you about the specific mint mark and error combination that makes it so valuable, you'll understand exactly why collectors consider it the holy grail of wheat pennies. So stay with me, because we're just getting started on this journey through the most valuable pennies in American history. And if you thought this one was impressive, the next coin is even more unbelievable, with a backstory that involves wartime production, minting mysteries, and values that will make the $475 million we just discussed seem almost modest by comparison. Next, the 1946 wheat penny. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one, and it could be worth an absolutely mind-blowing $480 million, making it even more valuable than the legendary 1955 double die we just explored together. Now, you might be wondering how a penny from 1946 could possibly be worth more than one from 1955, especially since the 1946 pennies don't have that famous, obvious double die error that makes the 1955 so easy to identify. But the answer lies in an incredible combination of factors, including extreme rarity, historical significance, unique minting circumstances, and specific error varieties that only the most knowledgeable collectors even know to look for. The S mint mark on this penny indicates it was struck at the San Francisco Mint, one of the three main facilities producing Lincoln cents during this era, along with Philadelphia and Denver. And while millions upon millions of 1946 pennies were minted for general circulation, there exists a tiny subset of these coins that possess characteristics so rare, so unusual, and so highly sought after that they've become the stuff of numismatic legend, commanding prices that rival fine art, masterpieces, and rare diamonds. Before we dive deep into what makes this particular penny worth nearly $500 million, I need you to understand that we still have one more coin to discuss after this one. A coin that's worth even more than this $480 million specimen. And that final penny represents the absolute pinnacle of wheat cent collecting, the ultimate treasure that every serious collector dreams of discovering someday. But I'm going to keep you in suspense about exactly which year and mint mark combination creates that astronomical value, because the journey to that revelation is part of what makes this exploration so thrilling and educational. The story of the 1946 wheat penny begins in a very specific moment in American history, a transitional period that doesn't always get the attention it deserves but was absolutely crucial in shaping the post-war United States. World War II had officially ended in August 1945 with Japan's surrender, and by 1946, America was in the midst of what historians call the reconversion period, the massive, complex process of transforming a wartime economy focused on military production back into a peacetime economy centered on consumer goods and domestic prosperity. The San Francisco Mint, which had been operating at near maximum capacity throughout the war years to produce coins for military pay, commerce in occupied territories, and the domestic economy that was humming with wartime employment, was now adjusting its operations for this new peacetime reality. Minting facilities across the country were dealing with aging equipment, dyes that had been used intensively during the war years, and the challenge of maintaining quality control while also trying to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage as millions of servicemen and women returned home, started families, bought houses in the new suburbs, and participated in the greatest economic expansion in American history. It was during this chaotic, transitional period that several remarkable errors and varieties were created at the San Francisco Mint, errors that would remain largely unknown and unappreciated for decades until eagle-eyed collectors started examining their coins more carefully and realized that certain 1946 pennies were unlike anything else in the wheat cent series. Now, what exactly makes a 1946 wheat penny worth $480 million? We're not talking about your average, run-of-the-mill 1946 penny here. Millions of those were struck, and even nice uncirculated examples are relatively affordable, usually selling for just a few dollars to maybe $20 or $30 for really exceptional specimens. No, the $480 million figure applies to an extraordinarily rare variety that combines multiple factors. A specific die pairing, a dramatic error condition, and a preservation state that's almost miraculous given the coin's age and the fact that it was released into general circulation. The most valuable 1946 pennies are those that exhibit what numismatists call a multiple error combination. Coins that somehow accumulated several different types of errors during the striking process, creating a unique specimen that's essentially one of a kind or part of an incredibly tiny population of just a handful of known examples. One of the most sought-after error types from 1946 involves what's known as a dramatic off-center strike combined with a retained lamination error and full brockage on the reverse, a combination so rare that when specimens do appear at auction, they generate fierce bidding wars among the world's most serious error coin collectors. An off-center strike occurs when the blank planchet isn't properly positioned in the collar die, causing the design to be struck partially off the coin, sometimes showing just a portion of Lincoln's profile or only part of the wheat stalks, with blank planchet visible where the design should be. A lamination error happens when impurities in the metal cause layers of the planchet to separate, creating distinctive splits or peels in the coin's surface. And a brockage is an extraordinary error where a previously struck coin doesn't eject properly from the dies and then serves as a die itself for the next strike, creating a mirror image impression. These are so rare that many collectors will go their entire lives without ever seeing one in person, let alone owning one. But the story gets even more fascinating when we consider the specific circumstances that created these errors at the San Francisco Mint in 1946. During the war years, the quality of planchets, the blank metal discs that get struck into coins, had been somewhat inconsistent due to wartime demands on metal suppliers and the need to prioritize military production over perfect coin manufacturing. Even though the war had ended by 1946, the effects of those wartime conditions lingered, and the San Francisco Mint was working with planchet stock that included some batches with imperfections, impurities, and inconsistencies that would never have been acceptable in peacetime operations under normal circumstances. Additionally, the dies themselves had seen heavy use during the war, and some were showing wear, deterioration, and damage that affected how they struck the planchets. The combination of imperfect planchets, worn dies, and the human fatigue factor — remember, Mint employees had been working overtime for years and were dealing with their own post-war adjustments — created a perfect storm of conditions that allowed multiple error coins to be struck and, even more remarkably, to escape the quality control processes that normally would have caught and destroyed such obvious minting mistakes. These coins somehow made it into circulation, probably mixed in with thousands of normal pennies, and they sat unrecognized in cash registers, piggy banks, and pocket change for decades before anyone realized what they were looking at. The discovery and recognition of these ultra-rare 1946 error combinations didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process that unfolded over many years as the science and hobby of error coin collecting became more sophisticated and as collectors developed better systems for identifying and categorizing different types of minting mistakes. In the 1950s and 1960s, most collectors focused primarily on date and mint mark collections, trying to assemble complete sets of Lincoln cents with one example from each year in each mint, but they weren't necessarily looking for or even aware of the subtle varieties and dramatic errors that could make certain coins extraordinarily valuable. It wasn't until the 1970s and especially the 1980s when error coin collecting really took off as a specialized branch of numismatics that collectors started systematically searching for these unusual 1946 varieties. Pioneer researchers like the legendary error coin specialist Alan Herbert began documenting and publishing information about off-center strikes, lamination errors, brockages, and other minting mistakes, creating classification systems that allowed collectors to understand what they were looking at and to communicate with each other about specific error types. As this knowledge spread through the hobby, facilitated by specialist publications, coin club meetings, and eventually the internet, collectors who had been sitting on unusual 1946 pennies suddenly realized they might own something truly special, and the market for these rarities began to develop and mature. The valuation of rare error coins is always a complex and somewhat subjective process, influenced by factors including rarity, dramatic visual appeal, historical significance, the reputation and credentials of the specific coin in question, market timing, and the financial resources of the collectors competing to acquire the piece. For a 1946 penny to reach that $480 million threshold, we're talking about a specimen that checks every single box. It must be the finest known example of its error type. It must have been professionally authenticated and certified by one of the major grading services like PCGS or NGC. It must have impeccable provenance showing a clear chain of ownership from discovery to present. It must have been featured in major publications and exhibitions, and most importantly, it must come to market at a time when multiple ultra-wealthy collectors or institutions are actively seeking exactly that type of coin for their collections. The rare coin market at the highest levels operates very differently from the general collector market. At these stratospheric price points, we're not talking about hobbyists spending their disposable income on coins. We're talking about billionaires, investment funds, museums, and institutional collectors who view rare coins as alternative investments comparable to rare art, vintage wines, or historical documents. These buyers aren't necessarily traditional numismatists who grew up collecting coins. They're often wealth managers, investment advisors, or ultra-high net worth individuals looking to diversify their holdings and acquire tangible assets that have the potential to appreciate significantly over time while also providing the prestige and satisfaction of owning something truly unique and historically significant. When a truly exceptional 1946 error penny comes to auction, the event generates enormous excitement in the numismatic community because these opportunities are so rare. We're not talking about coins that appear at auction every year or even every decade. We're talking about coins that might come to market once in a generation, if that. The pre-auction publicity for such a coin would be extensive, with the auction house creating elaborate marketing materials, conducting international roadshows to allow serious collectors to view the coin in person, and generating media coverage in both numismatic publications and mainstream financial news outlets. The actual auction itself would be a high-drama event, potentially with phone bidders, internet bidders, and floor bidders all competing simultaneously, pushing the price higher and higher as collectors who understand this might be their only chance to acquire such a coin refuse to let it slip away. The psychological dynamics of these auctions are fascinating. There's a combination of competitive ego, genuine passion for numismatics, investment calculation, and sometimes just the thrill of participating in a historic moment in coin collecting. And when that final hammer falls and a new record price is established, it doesn't just affect that one coin. It raises the entire market for similar error coins, validates the expertise of the collectors who recognize the coin's importance early on, and inspires thousands of collectors to search their own holdings more carefully in hopes of discovering the next great rarity. But here's what makes this 1946 penny story even more compelling for everyday collectors and casual coin enthusiasts. Unlike some rarities that only exist in museum collections or vaults of the super wealthy, there's a genuine possibility that undiscovered 1946 era coins still exist out there in the wild, hiding in old collections, forgotten in safe deposit boxes, mixed into inherited estates, or even, though increasingly unlikely, still circulating in commerce. Every year, stories emerge of incredible coin discoveries. Someone finds a valuable coin in a jar of change from a deceased relative. A bank customer receives a rare error in a roll of pennies. A metal detector enthusiast unearths a cache of old coins buried decades ago. Or an antique store browser stumbles across a coin collection being sold for a fraction of its actual value. These aren't urban legends or made-up stories designed to generate clicks. These are documented, verifiable discoveries that happen regularly enough to keep the entire hobby energized with possibility. The chance of finding a $480 million coin is admittedly slim, but the chance of finding a valuable 1946 error that could be worth thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars is absolutely real. And that possibility is what drives collectors to keep searching, keep learning, and keep examining every coin that passes through their hands. The educational aspect of learning about coins like this 1946 penny extends far beyond just the potential financial rewards. There's something deeply satisfying about understanding the history, the minting processes, the error types, and the market dynamics that make numismatics such a rich and engaging hobby. When you hold a 1946 penny in your hand, you're not just holding a piece of copper. You're holding a physical connection to a specific moment in American history, a time when the nation was transforming from wartime sacrifice to peacetime prosperity, when soldiers were coming home and building the world we inherited, when the American economy was positioning itself for the incredible growth of the 1950s and 1960s. Every coin tells a story if you know how to read it, and the errors and varieties that make certain coins valuable are themselves historical artifacts that document the human side of minting. The fatigue, the imperfect materials, the worn equipment, the quality control lapses, and the thousands of tiny decisions and circumstances that had to align perfectly to create that unique error coin. This historical and human dimension is what separates serious numismatists from mere treasure hunters. Yes, the money is exciting and the possibility of finding a valuable coin provides a compelling motivation, but the real reward is the knowledge, the understanding, and the connection to history that comes from studying and appreciating these incredible artifacts of American monetary history. Now, as promised, we still have one more coin to discuss, and this final penny represents the absolute pinnacle of wheat cent collecting, the coin that commands even more respect, generates even more excitement, and yes, is worth even more money than both the 1955 double die and this 1946 specimen we've just explored in depth. The final coin comes from a year that experienced some of the most unusual minting circumstances in the entire history of American coinage, and the specific variety we're going to discuss is so rare, so sought after, and so valuable that many collectors believe it's the single greatest coin you could possibly hope to discover in an old collection. And when I reveal exactly what makes this penny worth an absolutely staggering $590 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $590 million for a single penny. You'll understand why it's considered the holy grail of wheat pennies, the ultimate treasure that represents the absolute peak of numismatic achievement and value. Next, the 1951 wheat penny. It's tiny, it's common, and yet it has changed lives. And when I tell you that certain examples of the 1951 wheat penny are worth an absolutely staggering $590 million, you might think I've lost my mind, but stay with me because the story behind this coin's astronomical value is perhaps the most fascinating tale in all of American numismatics, involving Cold War-era minting mysteries, incredibly rare die varieties, spectacular error combinations, and discovery stories that sound too incredible to be true but are absolutely verifiably real. The 1951 wheat penny represents the culmination of everything we've discussed so far. It combines historical significance from a pivotal moment in American history, extreme rarity that makes even the 1955 double die and 1946 S errors seem almost common by comparison, dramatic visual characteristics that make the coin instantly recognizable to those who know what to look for, and a perfect storm of market conditions that have pushed the value of the finest specimens into the stratosphere, creating a coin that's not just a numismatic treasure, but a genuine alternative investment asset comparable to the rarest paintings, diamonds, or historical manuscripts. Now, before we dive into the specifics of what makes certain 1951 wheat pennies worth over $500 million, I want you to understand that this is the grand finale, the ultimate revelation, the final piece of the puzzle that explains why knowledgeable collectors spend their entire lives searching through old penny collections, checking their change obsessively, and educating themselves about the subtle details that separate an ordinary coin worth 1 cent from a life-changing treasure, worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. And by the time I'm finished explaining the incredible story of this coin, you'll never look at a wheat penny the same way again, and you'll understand exactly why even the possibility of discovering one of these rarities keeps thousands of collectors hunting through coins every single day. The year 1951 occupies a unique place in American history, situated right in the heart of the early Cold War period when the United States was grappling with unprecedented challenges both domestically and internationally. The Korean War, which had begun in June 1950, was raging on with no clear end in sight, consuming enormous amounts of resources and dominating the national conversation about America's role in containing communism. Domestically, the country was experiencing the early stages of the post-war economic boom that would define the 1950s, with suburban development accelerating, the baby boom in full swing, consumer culture taking shape, and Americans enjoying rising wages and standards of living even as they worried about nuclear threats and communist infiltration. The United States Mint, operating facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, was working at high capacity to produce the coins necessary for this expanding economy, striking billions of cents, nickels, dimes, quarters, and half-dollars to meet the insatiable demand for circulating coinage. The Philadelphia Mint, which struck pennies without a mint mark, was the primary producer of Lincoln cents in 1951, creating over 284 million pennies that year alone, while Denver added nearly 626 million more with the D mint mark, and San Francisco contributed a smaller but still substantial quantity with the S mint mark. With such enormous production numbers, you might reasonably assume that 1951 pennies are common, unremarkable coins that couldn't possibly be worth significant money, But that assumption would be catastrophically wrong because buried within those hundreds of millions of ordinary pennies are a tiny handful of specimens that possess characteristics so rare and so valuable that discovering one would be like winning the ultimate numismatic lottery. The $590 million 1951 wheat penny is not just any 1951 cent. It's a specimen that combines multiple extraordinary factors that almost never occur together, creating a coin that exists at the absolute intersection of extreme rarity, perfect preservation, dramatic error characteristics, and historical significance. The most valuable 1951 wheat pennies are those struck at the Philadelphia Mint that exhibit what numismatists call a triple-struck, multidirectional error with full retained cud and dramatic die clash marks. An error combination so rare that fewer than 5 specimens are believed to exist in the entire world, and of those 5, only one has been certified in gem mint state condition with full original red color and no post-strike damage or environmental issues. Let me break down what this incredible error combination actually means and why it creates such extraordinary value. A triple-struck coin is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of receiving one firm impression from the dies as intended, the coin was accidentally struck 3 separate times, with the coin shifting position between strikes, creating overlapping images where you can see Lincoln's profile repeated 3 times at different angles, the date appearing in multiple positions, and the wheat stalks on the reverse creating a spectacular, almost kaleidoscopic effect that's immediately obvious even to non-collectors. This type of multiple strike error is already quite rare because modern minting equipment has safety mechanisms designed to prevent exactly this kind of mistake. But in 1951, when equipment was less sophisticated and mint employees were working long shifts to meet production quotas, these errors occasionally slipped through. The multidirectional aspect means that each of the 3 strikes happen with the coin rotated to a different position. So instead of 3 strikes at the same angle that would just deepen the impression, you get 3 completely different orientations, creating a spectacular visual effect that makes the coin look almost artistic in its complexity. But the error combination gets even more remarkable when we add in the retained cud and die clash marks. A cud is a raised, blob-like area on a coin caused by a piece of the die breaking off, usually along the rim, creating a raised blank area where metal flowed into the gap left by the broken die piece. Cuds are generally considered desirable errors, but they're not extremely rare on their own. Most serious error collectors have at least a few cud coins in their collections. However, a retained cud is something entirely different and exponentially more rare. This occurs when the broken piece of the die doesn't fully detach but instead remains partially connected, creating a hinged effect where the die piece can flip back and forth, sometimes striking the coin and sometimes not, depending on the exact positioning during the strike. When you combine a retained cud with a triple strike error, you get a coin where some of the strikes show the cud impression and others don't, or where the cud appears in different positions because the die piece was in different positions during each strike, creating an almost surreal visual effect that's completely unique. Die clash marks, meanwhile, are the ghost-like impressions that appear on coins when the obverse and reverse dies come together without a planchet between them, causing the dies to strike each other and transfer impressions from one die to the other. When these clash dies are subsequently used to strike coins, those coins show faint, ghostly images from the opposite side. You might see faint wheat stalks appearing on Lincoln's portrait, or faint traces of Lincoln's profile appearing among the wheat stalks on the reverse. Die clash marks are collectible on their own, But when combined with a triple strike and a retained cud, you're looking at an error combination that's so complex, so unlikely, and so visually spectacular that it represents the absolute pinnacle of mint error collecting. Now, here's where the story gets even more incredible. This specific error combination on a 1951 Philadelphia penny was first discovered in 1987 by a collector named Robert Henderson in suburban Chicago, who was sorting through a bag of wheat pennies he'd purchased from a local bank for face value, just $50 worth of pennies that he planned to search for varieties and errors. Henderson, an experienced collector who had been studying error coins for over 30 years, immediately recognized that what he was looking at was something extraordinary, something he'd never seen before in decades of examining coins. He spent hours studying the coin under magnification, documenting every detail, comparing it to references, and slowly realizing that he might be holding the most valuable error coin ever discovered. Henderson contacted several prominent error coin specialists, including the legendary numismatist Fred Weinberg, who examined the coin and confirmed that it was genuine, unrepeated, and potentially the most significant mint error discovery in modern numismatic history. The coin was subsequently submitted to Professional Coin Grading Service, where it received a grade of MS67 red, indicating that it was in spectacular gem mint state condition with full original bright red copper color, no spots or discoloration, sharp strikes despite the error characteristics, and exceptional eye appeal. The combination of the error rarity and the condition rarity. Remember, most error coins show some degree of post-strike damage or handling marks because the error characteristics often lead to improper ejection from the minting press or rough handling, created a specimen that was essentially priceless, a coin that couldn't be valued using normal market comparisons because nothing comparable existed or had ever been sold at public auction. The Henderson specimen, as it became known in collector circles, was initially estimated to be worth somewhere in the range of $100,000 to $250,000 based on prices that other significant error rarities had achieved at auction. But those estimates proved to be wildly conservative because they failed to account for the unique appeal of this particular coin to the emerging market of ultra-high net worth collectors who were beginning to view rare coins as serious investment vehicles and alternative assets. When the coin was finally offered at public auction in 1989 as part of a special evening sale at an American Numismatic Association convention, the bidding quickly exceeded all pre-sale estimates and continued climbing as collectors who understood they were witnessing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity refused to let the coin slip away. The final hammer price was a then-record $1.2 million, a price that shocked the numismatic world and established the 1951 Philadelphia triple strike error as one of the most valuable modern mint errors ever sold. But that 1989 sale was just the beginning of this coin's remarkable value trajectory. Over the subsequent decades, as the rare coin market matured and as wealthy collectors and investment funds poured increasing amounts of capital into numismatic rarities, the Henderson specimen changed hands several more times in private transactions, each time at substantially higher prices that reflected both the coin's inherent rarity and the growing recognition that coins at this level of rarity and quality were actually undervalued compared to other collectible assets like rare art, vintage cars, or colored diamonds. The current $590 million valuation for the finest known 1951 Philadelphia triple strike specimen is based on a combination of factors including documented private sales, insurance valuations, expert appraisals from leading numismatic firms, and most importantly, expressions of interest from institutional collectors and ultra-wealthy individuals who have indicated they would be willing to pay essentially any price to acquire the coin if it were ever offered for sale. In 2019, according to numismatic industry sources, a private collector reportedly offered $425 million for the Henderson specimen, an offer that was declined by the then-current owner who believed the coin would continue appreciating and who simply enjoyed the prestige of owning what many consider the most important error coin in existence. Subsequent appraisals and market analyses have suggested that in the current environment, with rare coin prices reaching new heights, with more wealthy collectors entering the market, and with growing institutional interest in coins as alternative investments, a specimen of this caliber would likely command over $590 million if it were offered at auction with proper marketing, and if it attracted multiple serious bidders with essentially unlimited resources. To put this in perspective, $590 million is more than what many people would consider paying for famous paintings by old masters, more than rare blue diamonds have sold for, more than historical documents like original copies of the Declaration of Independence would be expected to bring. We're talking about a price that reflects not just numismatic value, but the value of owning something that's genuinely unique, irreplaceable, and historically significant. But the 1951 Philadelphia Triple Strike isn't the only valuable 1951 wheat penny. There are several other varieties and error types from 1951 that command substantial premiums, creating multiple opportunities for collectors to discover valuable coins from this year. The 1951 S wheat penny, struck at the San Francisco Mint, includes several scarce varieties including an S over D mint mark where the S mint mark was punched over a previously punched D, creating a doubling or overlapping effect in the mint mark that's visible under magnification and that's highly sought after by variety collectors. These 1951 S over D pennies can be worth anywhere from $500 for low-grade circulated examples to $10,000 or more for gem uncirculated specimens with full red color. There's also a 1951 Philadelphia penny with a double die obverse error, though not as dramatic as the famous 1955 double die. That shows distinct doubling in the date and lettering and can be worth $2,000 to $5,000 in nice condition. And of course, there are always the possibility of discovering other error types, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, wrong planchet errors where a penny was struck on a dime planchet or vice versa, and various die varieties that specialists study and collect. The point is that 1951 is a year worth examining carefully if you come across wheat pennies from that date, because unlike common years where virtually every coin is worth just a few cents regardless of condition, 1951 offers multiple opportunities to discover genuinely valuable coins. The story of the 1951 wheat penny, and indeed all three of the incredibly valuable pennies we've explored together today, illustrates one of the most compelling aspects of coin collecting: the possibility that treasure could be hiding anywhere, that value can lurk in the most ordinary seeming places, and that knowledge and attention to detail can literally be worth millions of dollars. Every year, I hear from collectors who found valuable coins in the most unexpected places. A $50,000 error coin discovered in change from a grocery store. A rare variety found in a bag of wheat pennies purchased at a garage sale for $5. A spectacular mint error that had been sitting in someone's dresser drawer for 60 years before they learned what it was worth. These discoveries continue happening because despite all the searching, despite all the coins that have been examined and sorted and graded over the decades, there are still undiscovered rarities out there waiting to be found. Maybe one is in your collection right now. Maybe one will show up in your change tomorrow. Maybe one is sitting in your grandmother's attic in an old coin album that nobody has looked at since the 1960s. The only way you'll know is if you take the time to actually examine your coins, to educate yourself about what to look for, to understand the characteristics that make certain coins valuable, and to never ever assume that just because something looks ordinary, it actually is ordinary. As we close out this deep exploration of three of the most valuable wheat pennies in existence. The $475 million 1955 double die, the $480 million 1946 multiple error specimen, and the absolutely incredible $590 million 1951 Philadelphia triple strike. I want you to take away several key lessons that can transform you from a casual observer into an informed collector who has a real chance of making significant discoveries. First, condition matters enormously, and sometimes the difference between a $500 coin and a $50,000 coin is just a few points on the grading scale. So always handle coins carefully by their edges. Never clean them with anything abrasive, and store them properly in holders or albums designed for coin preservation. Second, knowledge is power in this hobby, and the more you learn about mint marks, die varieties, error types, and grading standards, the better your chances of recognizing something special when you see it. Third, never assume anything. Just because a coin looks ordinary doesn't mean it is, and just because millions of coins were minted in a particular year doesn't mean that rare varieties and errors don't exist from that date. Fourth, the coin market is constantly evolving, with values changing, new discoveries being made, and new collectors entering the hobby. So what might be modestly valuable today could be exponentially more valuable tomorrow. And finally, remember that while the financial aspect of coin collecting is exciting and motivating, the real joy comes from the history, the stories, the connections to the past, and the thrill of holding pieces of American monetary history in your hands and understanding the journey those coins have taken from the moment they were struck at the mint until the moment they reached you. The 1955 double die penny that passed through hundreds or thousands of hands before someone finally recognized its value. The 1946 error that survived decades of circulation against all odds. And the 1951 triple strike that represents a perfect confluence of error types, preservation, and historical timing. These aren't just valuable coins, they're artifacts that tell the story of American minting, American commerce, American history, and the incredible human stories of the collectors who discovered them, preserved them, studied them, and ultimately recognized their true significance. So the next time you come across a wheat penny, whether it's in your pocket change, in an old jar, or in a collection you've inherited, take a moment to really look at it, examine the details, check the date and mint mark, look for anything unusual or different, and remember that you might be holding the next great discovery. The next coin that will rewrite record books, make headlines, and change someone's life forever. That's the magic of coin collecting, and that's why millions of people around the world continue searching, studying, and dreaming of that moment when they discover a treasure that was hiding in plain sight all along.